I have black, my opponent plays d4, and I'm going to play knight to f6. So I'm preventing the move e4. For now, my only concern is to stop his central advance. He plays the pawn c4, I'll play e6 to free my bishop on the dark square. He plays knight to f3, I'm going to give him a little check. I know he still has the means to counter it. He plays knight to c3, by the way. And in this position, I think I'm going to castle very quickly. I'm not against exchanging the bishop for the knight because it will change the color dynamics of the game. Sure, I won't have the bishop on the dark square anymore, but I'll have one more piece to play on the light square. And that interests me. Why? Because recapturing on c3 will weaken his pawn on c4. The pawn on c4, which is on a light square, is my strong color. I have one more piece to attack on the light squares. His bishop on the dark square won't be able to defend it. And this pawn on c4 can no longer be protected by another pawn because of the appearance of doubled pawns. So I'm going to start by playing pawn d6 to fight against the c5 push. I might even play pawn c5 myself to fix c4 permanently. And the idea will be to attack this pawn on c4. How? With knight c6, knight f5, b6, bishop a6, and to attack this pawn twice like that. So I'm going to play knight on c6 for now. He isn't afraid of the pressure on d4. He defends his pawn very well. But the knight can come to f5 at any moment. He plays pawn to h3. So I'm going to play b6. To get knight to a5, you need bishop to a6 very quickly to attack c4. I'm also considering the push to e5. After all, that would threaten the fork on e4. And if he counters with d5, knight a5 anyway to attack c4. Bishop b2 is played. Now I'm surprised by this move, bishop b2. Of course, he's hoping I'll take on d4 so he can recapture and undouble, but his bishop is struggling to play. He should have looked for the push to e4 to free his bishop and bring it out on that diagonal. Well, I certainly would have played h6 anyway. Listen, I'm going to play this pawn move to f5 anyway. This threat of a fork on a4 interests me. So he takes on e5, I recapture with the pawn, and you can see his pawn structure is very fragile. Sure, he has the pair of bishops, but what is he going to do with his bishop on the dark square? Nothing. For now, I'm the one with threats on the white square, the threat of a fork on a4, the attack on the pawn on c4 with moves like bishop to a6, knight to a5, or bishop to a6 to attack that pawn. He plays queen c2, so now he's coming to control the e4 square after all. I can't play e4. But I'm going to play queen e7. That way I renew the possibility of playing e4. And anyway, the queen on d8 was badly placed. I can't leave it on the open file. Sooner or later, the rooks will come face to face with my queen, so of course I need to move my queen aside. So I still have this threat of pushing to e4, which is interesting. Listen, I'm going to play bishop to b7. And maybe at some point take his bishop on the white square with discovered attacks from my knight, so that the bishop attacks his queen. But be careful, because when I take his bishop on the white square, the queen will come and attack the pawn on f5 twice if my knight moves. For example, knight takes, queen takes, and if my knight moves, he will take on e5 unless I come to d4. That's interesting, because if he plays queen takes e5, I play knight takes knight check, and then I pick up his queen. So knight takes, queen takes, knight to d4. That's a very interesting move, because then my bishop attacks his queen and his knight, and I'll be attacking his knight twice afterwards. So he can defend, right? Knight takes, queen takes, knight to d4. He could come to g4. Maybe I could also push f5. Listen, I like this move. I'm going to play it. I've talked about it too much not to do it. I'm too excited to play this move, knight to d4. And look, the bishop is attacking the queen. If queen takes on e5, he falls into the trap, knight takes check, and he loses his queen, and he's going to resign now. So you see, the Lichess computer tells me he should have played queen to g4, but I was still winning after f5. He can't come to g3 to protect his knight, otherwise there will be knight e2, the royal fork. So to protect his knight, he still has the h5 square, but then I can play g6. I attack his queen, and that's going to drop the defense of the knight. For example, queen to a6. And here I take on f3, knight takes on f3, check, pawn takes, bishop takes, and I've won a very important pawn, and his king is completely exposed with this bishop that dominates, that attacks the rook, by the way, and that controls the very important squares. And look at the bishop on b2, which is unable to play in this position. All right, my opponent plays e4, I have the black, and I'm going to play c5. It's a Sicilian defense. Let's see how it goes. Knight f3 is played. I play d6, bishop c4. He's targeting the pawn on f7, but I'm going to play knight f6, attacking the pawn on e4. He plays knight c3, and I'm going to play knight c6. For now, both players are setting up their positions. There's nothing special to mention. So he plays bishop d5. That's a bit surprising. I think I'm going to play e6. But when I play e6, he'll take and he'll double my pawns. He'll damage my pawn structure. But on the other hand, I'll have the bishop on the white square. But I'll need to make sure I give my bishop on the white square some activity and not end up like my opponent in the previous game with the bishop on the black square that wasn't doing anything. I don't mind having the pair of bishops, but when you have the pair of bishops, you absolutely have to be able to use the bishop that your opponent is missing. If I can't play on the white squares, how am I going to play on the black squares? My opponent will have one more piece than me to play on the black squares. All right, let's play this. I'm going to play as well. We're going to go into this position to show you. So on bishop, we take and then take again. Now, the only requirement for me is offensively to manage to make use of my bishop on the white squares, and defensively to manage to consolidate my black squares with a strong pawn structure on the black squares. He just played d4. Well, here it's hard not to take because taking after all doubles my pawns, so I'm going to take. And now the normal move, which seems normal to me, is to play e5. That consolidates my black squares and frees my bishop on the white squares. Come on, we're not going to waste much time on this. I'm going to play e5. He goes to d1, and how do I make the most of the bishop on the white square here? Well, by going to a 6, that will deprive him of rook. And if he plays knight to a 2 to finally block my bishop's control of the key square, he'll lose the pawn on e4. So I'm going to play bishop to a 6. Otherwise, the other way to make the most of the bishop on the white square was to play bishop to g4, the pin. But well, he would have played h3 anyway. He would have attacked my bishop right away. He plays bishop to g5. He's coming to pin me. And so here, if I play bishop to a 7 and he takes, we'll have a funny position with two bishops against two knights. It'll be a very unbalanced position. Well, I'm going to play it. Anyway, there's no better square for my bishop than to come to a 7. He plays queen to d2, and he's aiming for the queenside castling. But with the queenside castling, there's this open file, so I can play moves like rook to b8. Well, he's going to queenside castling anyway. Maybe queen to b6 to threaten mates, but he's capable of playing moves like b3 or knight to a4. What am I going to do here? Should I kingside castling myself now? On the other hand, if he takes my knight, I can recapture with the bishop, but if he goes for the queenside castling, he'll have this attack on the pawn on d6. I'll have to bring my bishop back. Actually, if I kingside castling, he'll queenside castling and threaten bishop takes knight. Because if I recapture with the bishop, I lose the pawn on d6. And if I recapture with the pawn, I dismantle the shelter of my king. I don't really want that. I think I'm going to play queen c7. It may seem modest, but it defends the pawn on d6. So after bishop takes, I can recapture with the bishop and still defend. And it frees up the d8 square so my rook can come to d8. That way, if he does queenside castling or even just plays rook to d1 and d6 is attacked, I defend, and I might even try to play d5 at some point. So I'm going to play queen to c7. I'm not at all sure it's the best move. There are certainly more active ones, but for now, I haven't found anything better in the time he's taking for the game. So he queenside castling, you see, and I can play rook to d8. So if bishop takes, I recapture with the bishop, and d6 is held. On the other hand, I haven't set up to attack his queenside castling. I've mainly set up to carry out the d5 push at some point. He plays queen to e3, opening the rook's file, and he's teasing the pawn on a 7 a bit, but I think I'm going to kingside castling. He plays h4, so if I play h6, I have to watch out for both sacrifices. Bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes. But also for the fact that white might not react. Because if I take the bishop, the pawn recaptures, it chases away the knight, it opens the file. The queen will also try to get onto the file, and it will trigger a salmon attack against the king. Now here, the move I'm looking at is knight to g4. I'm attacking his queen, and I'm attacking the pawn on f2. And after KVL g4, he can't play queen 2 to defend because there's the bishop. So after KVL g4, in the end, I'll force his queen to go back to d2. After that, I can take his bishop, but again, I won't do it because he'll recapture with the pawn and that opens the file. So knight to g4, queen to d2, and I don't really see what that gives me. I can play f6 though, to push back his bishop from the dark square. I'm not sure the e5 push works. If he takes, I can recapture with the pawn, but then the pawn on e5 becomes weak. He has 2 attackers, and I have only 1 defender. All right, I'm going to play this line with knight to g4. So queen to d2. Normally, I'm not afraid to play f6. And to solidify my dark squares, because sure, I open up the light diagonals, but he no longer has a bishop on the light squares, while I still have mine. So normally, I have no problem putting my pawn structure on the dark squares and defending my light squares. The problem with f6, I'll tell you, is that after bishop to e3, my knight lacks retreat squares, but I could simply take his bishop actually, so I'm going to play f6. So anyway, his bishop can't escape me, I can take it at any time. Now I'm looking at bishop to c4, to come back to e6 or f7, secure my king, secure the light squared diagonal, and support the d5 push. After all, I have a majority of pawns in the center, so that's where I need to develop. So I'm going to play like this, bishop c4. If I have to take his bishop on the dark square, I'm not in a hurry. I can take it at any time. He plays knight to h2. So now he's threatening to take my knight, so I'll have to decide between taking his knight and taking his bishop on the dark square. Well, but I'm still going to take his bishop on the dark square. I'm not sure here. Honestly, I like both options. And now I can play d5. Take, I defend twice, but b3 could bother me. But I'll have the intermediate move d4 with the fork. So now I can advance with d5. All right, I'll play d5. See, I'm steadily moving forward with my center right now. He takes, I recapture with the pawn. I have this intention to play d4. I have the majority of pawns, both bishops aiming towards his castling, the queen facing his king on the open file. The b file is also a semi-open file. My two rooks can be placed on the c and b files, supported by both bishops, and I have the central majority. Now, in my opinion, he's completely lost. He comes to d2. So I'm going to push d4. That seems like the natural move. And see how the pair of bishops are aiming towards his castling. If the knight moves, and I play bishop takes a 2, and he tries to play b3 to trap my bishop, I have bishop a3 mate. Well, not anymore, because the knight can still come back to b2. Bishop takes a2, b3, bishop a3, knight b2. But anyway, after bishop takes a2, b3, I can play bishop takes b3. The pawn on c is pinned. So let's take the pawn on a2. And now we go ahead and take the pawn on b3. At this point, I'm attacking the knight, so it naturally comes to b2. We have several strong moves available like bishop a3, which are quite nice, or even rook c8. However, I really like the look of bishop b4, because if he decides to take it, it is actually a beautiful mate on c2. So let's play bishop b4. Now, I wonder, what exactly is he going to try to play in this position? He's going to move away, he'll play queen e2 or queen d3, so instead we'll play rook c8. I could also have ideas like queen f5, queen a1 mate, because after queen f5 now, he can't take the bishop because of the pin. We can see how the pair of bishops completely dominated the knights in this game. He plays queen d3. So here, I have plenty of ways to play, but I'll just take on c2. We take here on c2, he'll go to b1. I can take the pawn on f2, or maybe continue the attack with bishop to a3. If I play bishop to a3, he's forced to move his knight, but where will he move it? To d3. All right, let's play this move anyway, bishop to a3. He has no other square than knight d3. If he plays knight c4, I don't take with the bishop, of course, because he would take my rook, but I take with the rook. After knight d3, I'll play rook c8. Maybe threatening fork a 2 check. All right, I play rook c8. Now I have the maximum number of pieces attacking his king. My two rooks are better than his. My two bishops are better than his two knights. But now he plays rook c1, and so my bishop can capture. I'm checking if I have anything better. So if I capture his piece, then he responds by taking mine. I can take, he takes back. I'm going to play bishop a 2 check first, by the way, to move his king away from protecting the rook. Ah, right, it's a game without increments. That's true. That's why he keeps playing. He wants to flag me as well. So let's play a bit faster. All right, I take, we exchange everything. I give check. I'm going to take the pawn on f2 and even the pawn on g2 afterwards. Unfortunately, his current knight has absolutely no square left. And now it seems he is definitely going to end up resigning from his position very soon. No, he doesn't resign. And there it is, he resigns. All right, I have white in this position, and I'm going to play the pawn to a4. I'm more of a d4 player, but let's change things up for fun. Knight f3, I attack the pawn on e5. Knight c6 defends it. He plays bishop to b5. The Spanish opening, or the Spanish game. So here, the idea is that I can exchange the bishop for the knight at any moment to change the color dynamics and alter the pawn structure. He plays bishop to d6. And so he figures that if bishop takes, he'll recapture with this pawn. He'll defend the pawn on f5 and free his light squared bishop. I'm not going to give him that satisfaction. I'll just develop either kingside castling or play pawn to d3, actually. I've seen games with pawn d3 against bishop d6. The idea is to play knight to d2 and knight to c4. That way we'll have a double attack on the pawn on d5, and I'll also have an attack on his bishop on d6. So here I'm threatening bishop takes knight, then we take, and to win the pawn on e5. But if knight takes and then we take, it also dismantles his pawn structure, which is interesting nonetheless. He could play queen to e7. That way he solves pretty much all the problems. But he does kingside castling. So here he gives up a pawn, but he gains a development advantage. Let's look. Bishop takes, then we take, knight takes e5, bishop takes, knight takes back. Rook e8, he'll come to attack my knight. If I go back to f3, bishop g4, he'll come to pin me. Is that a big deal? I'm not sure that's a big problem, especially since he's lacking a lever. Since the pawn on d7 took on c6, he won't have a lever like d5 to open up the position. And I'm also looking at taking his bishop on a dark square. Now that's completely different. If I take his bishop on a dark square, I'll have a dark squared bishop and he won't, so I need to play on the dark squares. How should I do that? My bishop would need to end up on this diagonal for it to be effective. Knight takes, pawn takes, and then push my pawn to get the bishop to a3. That would be annoying for him, the attack, but I think that after knight takes, the pawn takes b3, he'll actually have time to play d5. Yes, I'm going to take his knight on c6, and I'm going to go win the pawn on 5. Well, I'm aware that I'm giving him the pair of bishops, and therefore the only bishop on white square, and on top of that I'll be behind in development. I won't have to castle, he'll have the initiative, he'll be the one making the moves, so I might be in for a rough time. There are going to be a few tough minutes for me. I'll have to hold on, so knight takes. Now if he plays bishop gk right away, I'll eliminate it, so in my opinion he'll play bishop takes knight k and takes, oh no, maybe he'll play rook e8 here. But rook e8, I can play kdc4 to attack his bishop. Also free the pawn on e5 to have fork threats at some point. So here I need to play on the black squares and consolidate on the white squares. He has the pair of bishops, so I have to manage to keep his bishop on the white square in check. You see, in each of my games, as soon as there's an exchange of bishop for knight, my brain immediately switches into this color game, into this color-based strategy to make decisions in the position. That's actually what will guide my choice of moves. So he plays knight g4. If knight takes, bishop takes, he'll immediately put his bishop on a good square. But here I don't really have a choice. If I do have a choice, I could play knight c4 after all. His knight taking the square of the bishop, knight c4 is possible, but then he'll go after the f5 lever. That's what's well played with knight g4. He gets the f5 lever. And he doesn't care at all about weakening his king on the white squares because he has the bishop of the white square and I don't. So that's what he's aiming for. And his knight takes, bishop takes. As soon as he has f5, he'll open the file and attack me on f3. So after knight c4, if he plays f5, maybe the counter push e5, he's going to pin me with rook 8 or queen e7. So to deprive him of that move to f5, I need to play knight takes, bishop takes, h3. So if he plays bishop takes, queen takes, he could play f5 right away. I could take with the pawn, but that opens up the position. My king is still in the center. It's still a bit risky. But I'm mainly looking at knight takes, bishop takes, h3, because maybe he'll come to h5, but then I play g4. He'll come to g6, and then he won't have f5 anymore. And I can always play queenside castling, so I'm going to go for this line. I take on g4, and I'll immediately play h3, h3, And if he comes to h5, g4, and I secure the square f5 with bishop e3, queen d2, queenside castling afterwards, trying to steer the game into opposite castling, where on top of that I'll have advanced my pawns. He no longer has the move f5. I take with the pawn. I attack his bishop. I open the g-file for my rook, so he no longer has that lever that could allow him to open the white squares. I can't really move my knight because there are queens h4 that could come. The idea is to move the knight and also have f4 or f5. I can play, for example, knight d4 to try to get f4, but there will always be checks. I think it's a bit too early to do that. I'll play bishop e3 first. Queen d2, I might have sacrifices on h6, queenside castling, move the knight. f4, f5, h4, g5, h5. I'm going to have all the pawns attacking his king, like battering rams that are going to charge against his pawn structure, to smash it, to open the lines, to create breaches. And so you see how I fought against this bishop on a light square. Very quickly I realized that I was giving up the pair of bishops to my opponent, so I understood that my enemy was the bishop on the light square. And I'm going to fight against this bishop on the light square. Here he plays bishop to b4, check. If I play c3, I weaken my light squares. I would weaken d3. He would try to double the rooks or double the heavy pieces to attack d3, so I'm not going to do that. Here I think I'm going to play bishop to d2. This will offer the exchange of the bishops on the dark square, and thus break up his pair of bishops, leaving him only the bishop on the light square, which isn't active for now. Bishop takes, queen takes, I to castle afterwards, no problem. He comes to e3. If I play bishop to e3, this time he plays bishop takes, pawn takes, but he won't have h4 check. I have the knight covering it. I'll play e3. If he plays b4, I'll go back to d2. If he hits c5, I'll change my move to avoid a threefold repetition. But I'm going to play bishop to e3. I'll once again offer him the exchange of bishops on dark squares. I know that fits the strategy of exchanging the bishops on dark squares. So he won't want to. He'll play bishop to c5. But I'm not going to repeat the moves here. I'll change my move now. And probably play queen e2 to prepare the grand king. You see, queen to e2, he'll play rooks to e8, and he'll have the possibility to play f5. Because after pawn takes, bishop takes, I won't be able to recapture because of problems with my queen. So that's what's bothering me. To play on the dark square, I have queen to c1, but bishop takes, pawn takes, queen recaptures. My queen is alone. That's the problem. So the knight can come in, but the bishop is holding the h7 square. Otherwise, I have bishops to c3, queen to d2 to also put pressure on the dark squares over there. If I play f6, maybe play h4, g5 at some point. What bothers me with queen to c1 is that I can't queenside castling anyway. So we'll play queen to e2, but I don't like this move of queen to e2. It's not the right square for my queen. Normally it was bishops to e3, queen to d2. But he didn't let me get to that. Since I don't want the draw, I'm not going to repeat the moves, and I'm forced to change my moves. Now, if I were playing against Magnus Carlsen, of course I would have repeated the moves to get the draw. But, well, Magnus Carlsen would never have ended up in this position with the black. And of course, he wouldn't have repeated the moves against me. So the good news is, he's taking a bit of time, but just as I say that, he plays b6, so he's not taking any more time. He played immediately, so I'm going to do queenside castling. He plays a 5. He wants to send his pawns to try to break up my castling a little. Well, I'm going to start attacking as well on the dark squares, always. If I play g5, he counters with h5, so in my opinion, I need to play h4, then h5, push back his bishop, and then after having g5, we'll play h4. You see, I'll play h5 to fix h6 and be able to play g5 afterwards, because if I play the g5 liver right away, he counters with h5. So I must not let this lever on the dark square slip away from me. He plays h5 himself. What am I going to do? So if I capture, his bishop on the light square will be able to play. I don't really want that. Here, I'm looking at knight to f5. That frees my queen to protect g4. The knight also attacks his bishop on the light square and targets the pawn on c6. Knight e5, that interests me. All right, I'm going to play kdo5. That also frees the pawn f. That must be the right move, kdo5. Now I'm also threatening to capture. The queen defends the pawn on h5. So he takes that piece. And here I have the option to capture his bishop, or I can take his pawn. But actually, I think it is h5 that is the move that really needs to be played right now. All right, let's play h5. We're going to try to maximize the position for the attack on his king. And as I told you, I have to play on black since I don't have a white square bishop. And the most important pawn for him is the pawn on g7. The pawn that defends the black squares on the king side. So I'm going to play h6. If he counters with g6, he traps his bishop. And after I take on g4, I might have some chances to play on the dark squares. You see, this could get very interesting. So I play h6. We have to target g7. We have to break through g7. So as soon as the pawn advances, Kali takes on g4, bishop to c3, and we reorganize the fight like that to play on the dark squares. And you see, for now, I'm not at all tempted by the pawn on c6. That's not at all where our attention should be. We need to look at the king side. We're in a position with opposite castling. I need to attack his king, and if possible, on the dark squares. He hasn't touched my king yet. And he hasn't managed to play with his bishop on the light squares. So for now, regarding the two strategic elements of the position, the color play and the opposite castling, I have the advantage in both. I'm striking at his dark squares and I'm attacking his castling. He plays bishop to d4. I wasn't expecting that. But here, if he takes on a 6, that creates a fork. But I think I'll capture on g7 first to attack his rook. If I take on g7, maybe he'll even hit me with bishop takes knight, actually. I take his rook, he recaptures. He might want to give up the exchange to defend his position with both bishops on the diagonals. So I would tend to take on c6, remove his bishop from the dark square, and then take on g7 afterwards. That's probably what I'm going to do. So I was just telling you that I wasn't going to take on c6, and in the end I do take it. Just goes to show, in chess there are always surprises. The knight is looking for squares for forks on a7, depending on where the queen goes. But of course here that's not going to be possible because the queen will move while defending the bishop. And then I don't know if he plays queen d6. Oh no, he captures on b2. I hadn't thought of that at all, but why does he capture on b2? King takes, and he doesn't have a check afterwards. He can't win back my knight. I was afraid he would give me a check to win back my knight, but he doesn't have one. Wait, queen f6 check? Oh, I didn't see that at all. Bishop c3, he takes the knight, but then I still take his pawn on g7. All right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put the bishop on this diagonal, and then I'll take on g7 with threats at some point of rook takes, king takes, rook check if the king comes to g8, rook h8 mate, because the pawn on g7 is protected by the bishop, and the pawn will protect the rook. If queen takes knight, there are no checks after queen b5, king a1, and the dark squares is safe. Taking g7 attacks his rook. He might give me a check just for fun, but king a1, and there's really nothing. And now we're in a position with opposite colored bishops. So he managed to reach my king, but in this opposite colored bishop position, I can play on the dark squares while he can't play on the light ones. Look at my pawn structure, which completely blocks his bishop on the light square. So if the rook moves, I don't know, rook e8, rook takes bishop, king takes, rook check. He can't go back to g8 because of mate on h8, so he'll come to g6, but queen takes on g4. It's a nightmare for him, actually. It's mate. Queen takes on g4. He won't be able to escape to f6. So that means if he moves the rook, he's going to face a mating attack. And he moves the rook. So we take on h7, and now maybe he'll resign. Rook to h1, check. Luckily, there's a good pawn because sometimes you can give a check and forget that you might get captured. And so king to g8, rook to h8 mate, king to g6, queen takes on g4 mate. And he plays queen to h6. Well, you know what? I hadn't even seen his queen coming back to h6. Well, obviously it's losing for him because I'm going to take his queen. But it's still pretty funny that there are actually moves I forget about. It must be my age. So here I'm going to take on g4. Do I have any other interesting moves? Maybe a check coming on h7. No, but taking on g4 is very good. I take on g4. But I thought I had mate, and I don't have mate. But it's a game without increment. I have to play very fast. That's what it is. That's the problem. I forget every time. So if he takes, I recapture with my queen. Even with the bishop, it will be interesting. I'll play queen g5, king h7, queen h5, mate. I'm going to play something like that. Fortunately, he doesn't have much time either. He's going to flag me, the little rascal, because I'm used to playing games with increments, with time added after each move. So when I start playing a series of games without increments, I'm always surprised. I'll do it 100 times, and I'll be surprised 100 times, actually. Well, he has less time than me now, so it'll be fine. So I take queen check, row hachette, queen h5 mate. And here with some move, it mates directly. Well, there you go. I hope the video was interesting, that you enjoyed it, and that I was able to enhance your understanding of the game and your strategic vision. You can leave me likes, comments, share the video, and support the channel. Goodbye, everyone, for more adventures on the chessboard.